Greetings, subscribers and patrons. Welcome back to the new show. I'm Random Rob. Today we're going to talk about a horror comedy television film from 1972 that spawned several sequels, an unsuccessful series that ended up becoming a cult favorite and ended up inspiring the X-Files. I'm of course talking about The Night Stalker, and I'm going to tell you 3 things you need to know about this iconic TV movie. I know usually I do 5, but with the information I was able to find, 3 was a better number. So without further ado, number 1, the sleeper hit. The Night Stalker grew out of author Jeff Rice's book, The Kolchak Papers. Rice had spent most of his life living in Las Vegas and had wanted to write a story that incorporated the city into the narrative. The book was eventually optioned to ABC, who would hire legendary mystery and horror author Richard Matheson to write the screenplay. The film was produced by Dan Curtis and directed by Don Llewellyn-Moxey, who had previously worked on the TV show Dark Shadows. The story of the snarky, down-on-his-luck reporter Carl Kolchak pursuing a real-life vampire through Las Vegas became an instant hit. It was the most popular TV movie ABC would air that year, netting a 54 share. Matheson would win an Edgar Award from Mystery Writers of America for Best TV Feature. A sequel, The Night Strangler, would be written by Richard Matheson and would air the following year in '73. The Night Strangler also did very well, and another sequel was planned called The Night Killers, written as a collaboration between Matheson and science fiction author William F. Nolan, who many would know for Logan's Run. The Night Killers was going to take place in Hawaii and involve a conspiracy about UFOs, a nuclear power plant, and humans being replaced by android doubles. But this film would never get made, and ABC instead decided to turn Kolchak into a weekly TV series, which actor Darren McGavin would be executive producer for, although he was not always credited as such. The show went forward without ABC securing the rights from Jeff Rice for the characters, who immediately sued ABC. There was a quick settlement, and Rice's name was put onto the credits as the creator of the series, although he didn't end up having much input in the show. Kolchak the Night Stalker ended up being canceled after 1 year and 20 episodes. The reasons for the cancellation included mediocre ratings and the fact that Darren McGavin was increasingly unhappy with the Monster of the Week format, and that by the end of the run of the show was having to split his time between producing, editing scripts, and dealing with a crushing shooting schedule, and wanted out. There's another rumor, and I can't attribute it directly. I believe I read it in Fantastic Television years ago, that the head of ABC or the head of programming at ABC had gone on a mental health hiatus due to stress, and that Kolchak the Night Stalker was put into production while he was away, and when he returned, he said something to the effect of, "What the hell is this?" and immediately canceled the show. I can't confirm that story, but I think it's funny. But that was not the end of Kolchak the Night Stalker. 2 additional TV movies were made, one called The Demon and the Mummy, and the other The Crackle of Death. And both of these were made by cobbling together footage from 2 episodes apiece, and then adding a new narration by McGavin. ABC also re-released 2 episodes, The Ripper and the Vampire, in the late '70s. And despite the mediocre performance of the television show, the re-releases were well received, and Kolchak would appear in syndication in 1981, again in 1987. During the 80s syndicated runs, the 4 episodes that had been used to make the 2 TV movies were not included. And it wouldn't be until the early 1990s when the Sci-Fi Channel picked up the rights to Kolchak would the complete 20 episodes be aired again. Some notable trivia about the Night Stalker TV series. It would feature one of the first screenwriting credits by Robert Zemeckis and Bob Gale, who wrote the episode Chopper. And many of the Kolchak episodes were edited by a young David Chase, who would go on to create The Sopranos. The show also featured a host of terrific character performances by actors like Scatman Crothers, Dick Van Patten, Carolyn Jones, Tom Skerritt, Eric Estrada, Phil Silvers, Jamie Farr, Jackie Mason, Stella Stevens, Jim Backus, John Hoyt, Richard Kyle. Although the series would take a lot of twists and turns and decreased in quality as it went along, the novelty of Jeff Rice's original concept, i.e. how do you track down a vampire in a city where half the people work at night and sleep during the day, and the brilliance of Matheson's writing can't be overstated. That and Darren McGavin's terrific performance. McGavin was one of those actors who was a master of sounding warm and sarcastic, and was a perfect fit for this kind of dialogue. An example of what I'm talking about: Sherman Duffy of the Chicago Globe once described a reporter as follows: "Socially, he fits in somewhere between a hooker and a bartender. Spiritually, he stands beside Galileo, because he knows the world is round, not that it does much good for us when his editor knows it's flat." Yeah, I love the dialogue in this movie. Number 2, the silent vampire. The vampire, Janos Skorzeny, is played in The Night Stalker by veteran TV actor Barry Atwater. Atwater was known for his appearances on shows like One Step Beyond. I always remember him as the Vulcan Surak in the 3rd season Star Trek episode The Savage Curtain, and his terrifying performance as Dr. Temple in the 1st season Outer Limits episode Corpus Earthling. He had this great, deep, sonorous, monotone voice. Interestingly though, Janos Skorzeny's character is done without dialogue, and in hindsight this is probably a pretty good choice. It makes him more inhuman to not speak. It allows the viewer's imagination to fill in more of the details about him. And despite having no lines, he's a formidable presence on screen, mostly due to the physicality with which his character is portrayed. Since Skorzeny is supposed to have superhuman strength, he's often shown in confrontations with police officers, hurling people across rooms, out of windows. And these scenes still work surprisingly well because of the energy that the stuntmen on the film put into it. They really threw themselves into their work. Now, I had mentioned in my previous comments the novelty of the concept. Who would notice a vampire in Las Vegas? Apparently the producers tested this out and had Barry Atwater, in his vampire makeup, walk around casinos for several hours. Unsurprisingly, none of the casino patrons took any notice of him. Another funny bit of trivia: Atwater originally had to wear red specked contact lenses to give his eyes a bloody appearance, but his reaction to wearing them was such that his eyes turned red anyway, so he didn't have to keep them on during filming. Number 3, the X-Files connection. Chris Carter said in an interview once that the X-Files was 10% Twilight Zone and Outer Limits, 30% Kolchak the Night Stalker, and 60% inspiration. Sidebar, I have a cousin who's worked in television for years. I asked her once what she thought of the X-Files, and she said if it's not a Vince Gilligan episode, I just turn it off. The obvious thematic connection between the Night Stalker series and the X-Files can be seen in how Kolchak ends up investigating strange murders that the police don't really want to deal with or don't have a clue about how to solve. He investigates and more often than not finds a supernatural or science fiction-ish reason for what's happening that he's never able to prove. Character-wise, though, Fox Mulder and Carl Kolchak are primarily different in that Carl Kolchak does not believe in the supernatural. It's just that he's willing to entertain it when all the facts fit. It's worth noting the 1st season X-Files episode Tombs is very similar in plot to the movie The Night Strangler, which is about an immortal Civil War era doctor who kills women to draw off their blood to make an elixir of life, which he has to ingest and then goes into a form of hibernation for years at a time. Carter also recognized McGavin's contribution by having him play Arthur Dales, who's clearly modeled on Kolchak. And another similarity is in the television show's themes. The X-Files has the iconic whistle. The Kolchak theme starts every episode being whistled by McGavin before the orchestra kicks in. So would I recommend The Night Stalker? Yes, it's a very entertaining TV movie. Barry Atwater makes a great vampire. Darren McGavin is wonderful as the wisecracking Kolchak. And it's also amusing to see the character of an investigative journalist in a pre-Watergate era, before it was fashionable. There's nothing fashionable about Carl Kolchak. McGavin said much of his original inspiration for how to play the character came from the idea of a man who had been fired from a New York newspaper in the 50s and hadn't bought a new suit in 20 years. Also funny to note how tabloids of the 80s would be filled with stories about the supernatural and UFOs, but in 1972, not so much. So what did you think of The Night Stalker? What did you think of the TV series? Let me know in the comments below. And if you liked what you heard, press the like button and subscribe, and consider becoming a patron of the new show. I could use your help. Okay, this is Random Rob for the new show, signing off. Be excellent, and take care. The new show is made possible by generous support from viewers like Tony, Arnell, Skipnick, Christopher, Marion, Eric, and B. Thank you so much for your support.